It's now my great pleasure to introduce the Chair of the Funding Council, Professor Alice Brown.
Thank you very much, Douglas, for your introduction. I'm always delighted to address an audience from the college sector. The Minister referred to the fact that the colleges do offer huge opportunities for people and literally change their lives. I can talk from personal experience of that. I mean, I left school at 15 and I didn't return to study till I was in my mid-30s when I was a student at the former Stevenson College in Edinburgh. And I then went on to University of Edinburgh and, things just developed from there. So I can say personally a huge thanks to all of you and others that are involved in the sector for making such a difference to my life. But I have the opportunity today also to share with you my thoughts on the valuable work performed by colleges and the important part that you as board members play in that success. But I also would like to share with you my reflections on future developments. But first of all, I thought it would be helpful if I summarise what and who we are as the Funding Council. Put simply, we are the national strategic body for the funding of further and higher education in Scotland. Now, this might seem like a rather dull remit. Indeed, I was told when I took on the role as chair of the Funding Council that it was considered to be Scotland's most boring quango. However, I can assure you that life at the Funding Council is far from dull and boring. In the past few years, there has been a great deal of attention at the Council, and a lot of that has related to college governance. This makes it very important that we at the Funding Council and you as college board members work together well in going forward. For that reason, I want to talk today about what the Funding Council does, what it hopes to achieve, and how that relates to your work as board members. But before I go on to the main part of what I have to say, I think it is important, as the Minister has done and Hugh has referred to acknowledge the very serious issues that have arisen in recent years. I've seen some excellent examples of governance in the college sector over the years also, but failings in some colleges impacts on all of us, on our reputation, and it undervalues the huge and important work that is done by the sector. So you'll be hearing from others today on progress in addressing some of the lessons learned, and Hugh has just referred to some of that. And of course, it's important to get the basics of good governance right. But today I also want to focus on just some, because there's not time to focus on all, but just some of the wider issues for boards. Because I believe that together, and with others, we play a significant role in helping to transform the lives of our students and in contributing substantially to local communities and to the Scottish economy. Now, the Funding Council funds and supports 25 colleges, 19 universities and other higher education institutions. That means that we teach 470,000 students in colleges and universities, huge number of students. It involves 49,000 college and university full-time equivalent staff. And of course, we have a total annual budget of around £1.6 billion. You've no idea how popular you become for lunch and for dinner when you've got a budget of £1.6 billion. But our ambition is that Scotland will be the best place in the world to learn, to educate, to research and to innovate. And we can only do that with you. And as a public body, our task is to care for and develop the whole system of colleges and universities and their connection with other parts of the education system, and of course their contribution to Scotland's educational, social, cultural and economic life. Now, members of the board are appointed by the First Minister of Scotland and have a collective responsibility for the proper conduct of the Council's affairs. They are not appointed as representatives of individual organisations, and it's important to make that point because there are people from the college sector and the university sector, but they're not representatives. They're there bringing a wider perspective to our discussions. Our board currently consists of 7 men and 7 women, happy coincidence, drawn from very diverse backgrounds and with a balance of interests and expertise across the Funding Council's policy and investment areas. So we're very proud that we were one of the first public bodies in Scotland to achieve the government's ambition of equal gender representation. I take a particular pride in that, given my background in promoting equal opportunities. Now, what about our strategic aims and how do they link with you? I'd like to turn to those and our assessment of overall performance in the sectors. Our current strategic plan for the period 2015 to 18 has three key outcomes that won't be a big surprise to you. The first being high quality learning and teaching, the second world-leading research, and the third greater innovation in the economy. Now, underneath each of these strategic plan outcomes are a number of themes and a planned programme of change. So in developing these outcomes and themes, we are, of course, influenced by strategic objectives in ministerial letters of guidance, which we receive, the Scottish Government's National Performance Framework, including relevant national outcomes and indicators, the Scottish Government's Programme for Government, and, of course, Scotland's economic strategy. And we deliver our strategic plan priorities through a combination of outcome agreement funding to colleges and universities, but also through strategic and capital funding. Now, as most of you will be aware, we introduced outcome agreements in 2012, and the outcome agreement funding is linked to negotiations of outcome agreements with colleges, college regions, and individual universities. And that sets out how colleges and universities will deliver our strategic plan priorities and, in turn, Scottish Government priorities in return for the public money that colleges and universities receive. Now, as part of the outcome agreement approach, we set very ambitious national and institutional targets in our discussions with you to ensure that we maximise the impact of our funding. The whole point of introducing such agreements is to actually be able to demonstrate impact and the difference that is made with this public money. And our outcome agreement guidance therefore asks colleges and universities to, quote, adjust and adapt their curriculum in response to evidence of current and future skills needs of employers and the economy, end quote. We then use measures such as the proportion of graduates entering professional occupations to evaluate that progress. So the outcome agreement is very, very important to you as board members. It is the main funding contract between the Funding Council and your college or region. Therefore, you need to be assured as a board member that your outcome agreement is addressing the right things and to hold your college executive to account for effectively delivering it against the targets. So how do we assess some of the performance here? Well, in relation to the outcome on our strategic plan on high quality teaching and learning, our aim is to achieve an outstanding system of learning which is accessible and diverse and where students progress successfully with the ability, ideas and ambition to make a difference. And none of us in this room would disagree with that. So if we look at the first slide, which should come up, first of all, and importantly, employers believe that our colleges and universities enhance significantly the employability of students, as is indicated by the 78% who consider that college graduates are well prepared or very well prepared for work. But clearly, some more work still to do. If we look at the next slide on destinations of college students for confirmed qualifiers, secondly, this shows that our new publication on the destinations of college students confirms that their destinations are overwhelmingly positive, around 96%, which is quite considerable. But you have to look at some of the statistics because you have to look at who's included in that overall target because there's different ways of measuring these things. Thirdly, if we look at our next slide, and that's the percentage of enrolled students successfully achieving a recognised qualification, colleges have delivered steady improvement on learner success, although there was a little drop in 2014-15, about 1.9 percentage point drop in the performance for students enrolled at full-time FE, and just not 1 percentage point drop in the full-time ITCHE provision. So in the agreements with colleges as a whole this year for outcome agreements, we hope to increase the FE success rate to 69% and the ITCHE success rate to 72%. So that's been part of our negotiations and outcome agreements. If we move on, and here we're looking at colleges, college entrants from the 10% most deprived postcodes in Scotland. And again, we see that colleges also continue to devote a significant and increasing amount of resource to meeting the needs of learners from the most deprived areas. In other words, meeting the government's widening access agenda. And the numbers articulating from college to university with advanced standing is increasing and is on the way to securing the national ambition of 4,100 students articulating with advanced standing by 2016-17. Now, this is, again, very important statistic, but it also demonstrates that crucial link between our colleges and our universities and different routes for our students going forward. Now, if I say a little bit more about impact and success of mergers as well, I think it links to some of what I've just outlined, because the performance I've just described is a huge credit to the students themselves who have achieved so much, but also to the staff and management of all colleges, but also to you as board members in guiding and monitoring the strategies of your respective colleges. So you've played a huge role in that. Those things don't happen by accident. And it also, in part, due to the positive outcome, I would argue, of the programme of college mergers. And that, again, if you want to see more information on that, is reported in our recent publication, Impact and Success of the Programme of College Mergers. Now, the college merger programme was one of the most ambitious in Scotland in recent years, and therefore it was important that we evaluated it fully. So along with individual evaluations that we have published separately, our report provides the full assessment. There is much to celebrate and to reflect on this report, and we are taking into account our work on this going forward. And we're especially pleased, I would argue, with the evidence of positive impacts on the student experience. In summary, the merger programme has led to the formation of colleges which are more resilient and sustainable for the future, as Hugh has indicated. The mergers have created a landscape better suited to the delivery of skills, engagement with employers and universities, and better able to implement the development of the Young Workforce Initiative and further improve learner journeys. Thirdly, the larger colleges created are working well and are confident and ambitious with a clear focus on putting learners at the centre. And fourthly, and the evidence shows, that there have been efficiencies and benefits of scale, and these are being realised across all of the merged colleges. Having said that, there is clearly more work to be done. And as you're aware, and Caroline will be speaking to you in a moment, Audit Scotland made recommendations in its report on Scotland's colleges that was published in August of this year. The report highlights areas where improvements should be made, for example, how all the benefits from regionalisation and mergers are measured and progress publicly reported, as well as the costs and savings achieved, but also the need to identify a way to better assess demand for college courses across Scotland. And this is an ongoing issue, obviously, for us in the Funding Council, but clearly for you in your colleges delivering courses that are relevant both to students but also to employers. So this takes me neatly on to future developments. As well as the very specific issues you'll be discussing today, I think we need to consider the wider changes in the context in which we're all working. Since the establishment of the Funding Council, the Scottish Funding Council in 2005, which in itself, remember, was a merger of the Funding Council for Further Education and the Funding Council for Higher Education, the educational, political and economic landscape has changed substantially. And following the global economic downturn in 2008-09, public spending has been under severe pressure, which has required the Council to respond flexibly and quickly, and by working collaboratively across the public sector to ensure that colleges and universities not only continue to deliver, but do so better, smarter, and more effectively. Now, another major change that has been referred to already this morning has resulted from the outcome of the EU referendum earlier this year, and as yet, we don't know the full consequences or implications for colleges and more generally. However, whatever the outcome, Scotland's economic future will depend on our continued ability to capitalise on being globally competitive, and this in turn requires a globally competitive and skilled workforce. Such a fast-changing economy and political environment demand increased agility and responsiveness by policymakers and funding agencies. And while highly constrained public funding makes it harder to simply develop and fund new projects and ideas, there are also new and real opportunities to change the way our skills and enterprise support system is funded and operated. It won't have escaped your notice, of course, that the First Minister announced a review of enterprise and skills support in Scotland in May of this year, specifically looking at the Funding Council, Skills Development Scotland, Scottish Enterprise and Highlands and Islands Enterprise. And we're expecting the publication of phase 1 of this review at 11:30 this morning. So you'll have to forgive me if I appear a bit distracted this morning. I'll be rushing back to the Funding Council where, of course, we want to inform our staff about the key implications for them. So I'll not speculate, obviously, on the recommendations of the review before it's published, but regardless of the specific details, there are still challenges for the Funding Council and the colleges and universities that we fund. And we have these anyway. For example, how can colleges and universities work even more closely with industry to invest in talent development, innovation, and the skills in its own workforce, as well as better aligning college and university provision with economic need? Just one big area of question. Secondly, how can we generate greater levels of inclusivity and equality of opportunity among disadvantaged groups in Scotland so they have equal chances to share in the benefits of economic growth? And thirdly, how can we better help businesses to grow and expand by being more productive, export active, and innovative? These questions will be there regardless. And as part of the Funding Council's submission to the review, we identified some areas where we consider there are opportunities for the system to work more effectively for the benefit of students, the economy, and for society more generally. Let me just concentrate on 2 of these, the learner journey and work-based learning, where colleges, I would argue, have a key and central role to play. Now, the learner journey, first of all. To say that the education system is changing and will continue to change, of course, is an understatement. And as you know, the various parts of the system that prepare people for the work and other aspects of life are not self-contained and unconnected. We argued in our submission that young people should have the opportunity to follow pathways that can lead them into jobs or apprenticeships or college or university, or indeed a combination of all of these things. Their route should be driven by their own, ideally well-informed choices, and should allow progression from one level to the other. Therefore, the route should be built to support choices, and there should not be a series of unconnected pathways that are inefficient and difficult to navigate. I mean, it's often difficult for us as people within sectors to understand all the different pathways and avenues, let alone those who are unfamiliar with it. So school, college, work-based and university options need to be more closely aligned. We argued that there was a need to move in the direction of more connection and the creation of a system driven by learners and employers, not the needs of a set of sectors or funding bodies. And of course, there's evidence that this is beginning to happen. We are making progress on the school to college transition, the school to university, and college to university linkages. And these, of course, are all helping to drive progress in developing the young workforce, the government's aspirations on widening access, and so on. And this is an approach that I think will have support, and we look forward to enhancing and developing it with you in the years to come. Takes me on to the second area, and that's work-based learning. Again, a very important part of the skills system. And again, we think it could be better integrated to other parts of the system and be grown further, particularly at graduate apprenticeship level. At the moment, it's confusing. Funding for apprenticeships is not clear as it could be. The Funding Council funds the whole of the academic delivery of foundation apprenticeships, and Skills Development Scotland supports additional costs. The Funding Council funds some college-based elements of modern apprenticeships in addition to SDS's funding and some financial support from other partners. This happens through a through a variety of routes, and this system clearly could be simplified and made more transparent. There's an opportunity to more fully integrate the apprenticeship family of foundation apprenticeships, modern apprenticeships, and graduate apprenticeships into the whole education system. Without better integration, there is a real risk that the drive for more young people to go into higher education at the same time as meeting the target for the number of FTE places in colleges and the target for the number of apprenticeships could start to come into conflict, especially at a time where we've got demographic change reducing the number of young people in the system. So part of the solution is to see post-16 learning as one system and recognise that people often move through one part to another and that the various parts are dependent on each other. For example, universities and colleges need each other to deliver articulation, and apprenticeships depend on core college provision. So again, I would expect endorsement of this type of approach moving forward. This takes me to my final area, and that's in relation to innovation. Now, you may have read articles in the print media about Scotland's innovation centres. And the Innovation Centre programme covers 8 centres, covering digital health, data lab, construction, oil and gas, Scottish aquaculture, industrial biotechnology, stratified medicine, and the sensor imaging systems. And it represents about £120 million of Funding Council investment over 6 years. Now, originally, the centres have involved partnerships between businesses and universities working together to address industry-wide challenges and problems and unlocking the potential of existing and, crucially, emerging markets. But little has been said in the discussion about the role of colleges, and I think that's something that's been missed. Now, happily, an independent review of the innovation centres has recently been completed by Professor Graham Reid, and we understand there's to be a parliamentary debate on the topic and the review quite soon. Now, the outcome of the review was very positive, and Professor Reid made a number of key recommendations for the future. But one of these recommendations, which will be of interest to you, is that the Funding Council should explore the participation of Scotland's colleges in the Innovation Centre programme. Now, this is something that we had already initiated by setting up a college innovation group headed by one of our board members, Audrey Cumberford. Now, Audrey will be known to you as principal of West College Scotland. And the group is expected to update our council next month with a view to producing an action plan to implement Professor Reid's recommendations. So we'll keep you posted on this, but I think this is a very exciting initiative that will provide different types of opportunities for colleges to engage in the innovation programme. So just a few concluding remarks. I've talked this morning about what the college sector has achieved and can contribute. As board members, I hope you will be part of the conversation about what the government and the Funding Council expects from the sector and how it rises to some of the challenges that I have identified going forward. And in your work on governing your colleges, you need to be aware of what it is you're holding your principals to account for. Now, I spoke at the beginning about some of the governance issues that have caused headlines, negative headlines in recent years, but we believe that the sector is learning lessons from these examples, and as Hugh has outlined in his presentation, the sector, the government, and the Funding Council have been working together to ensure that this happens, and I think that type of partnership approach is extremely positive. But part of your role as board members is not just to ensure that you avoid some of the mistakes of the past. You need to be looking at the whole range of what a board is there for. I know that this is what you have covered in many of the recent board member induction programmes, and one of the indicators that a board is operating effectively is, of course, that as well as getting the governance basics right, it is focusing on how its college or region is delivering for its students that come through its doorways. So I'm sure that you will take the opportunity to explore these and other issues in your workshop today. My message to you is that I and my colleagues on the board and the staff at the Funding Council recognise the critical role that college boards and you as individual college members play in the success of your colleges. And for that, I both applaud and thank you. But as I've also said, there's more to be done, and new opportunities to explore. So I therefore look forward to continuing our work with you and to developing initiatives such as the Learner Journey, work-based learning and innovation, and many others. Thank you very much for listening.